Okay, so I have been transparent about games for a very long while, and I prevented myself from making another one of these videos. But I was rummaging around within my PC, whether it be on YouTube or just currently searching up, to find out that EA Games is putting Need for Speed on hold in favor of Battlefield. Let's just say that this kind of thing was pretty much unsurprising. And I'd say that because we had this happen at least a few years ago. The time where Need for Speed Heat was around and about, and Ghost Games trying to make updates in regards to Need for Speed Heat. However, that didn't last very long until somewhere within the winter, it was confirmed that Criterion was going to be making the next set of Need for Speed games, and that Ghost Games has most likely downgraded to which nowadays probably has shut down. As a follow-up within February 12th of 2020, where Black Panther was basically screaming bloody murder in regards to this.
Livid, devastated, angry, frustrated. I cannot even begin to tell you how I feel right now.
Then, of course, following up to a few months later within the summer of June, another news post in regards to this game talking about there being cross-platform. To which a heavy case, this did not really solve the serious lack of player versus player inside the game. But as for another Need for Speed game that was supposed to come out in the year of 2021, the game eventually got postponed to 2022. Which meant, of course, that Criterion Games were not able to work on Need for Speed 2021, aka Need for Speed Unbound, until 2022. Since EA is pulling in both of its biggest contributors in regards to game development, DICE and Criterion, alongside with Ripple Effect Studios and EA Gothenburg, which was of course Ghost Games. So there is the long and short in regards as to how this is not really even new, and most likely a community dispute between the two games.
Oh no, so terrible.
Not really saying that's actually going to happen, but you may never know. I had read a few comments before in one of Black Panther's more recent videos, and what happened is a lot of people are not happy with this kind of thing happening. I would validate even further if I went down and dig deeper within the social media platforms that this game has. However, I do not have Instagram, or at least I don't remember having it, and I don't look over at Twitter anymore because, well, let's just say that I decided to walk away pissing off a few people, despite the fact that I've commented on more stuff that isn't specifically this. But anyways, essentially what's going on is that the very few studios are working together, which is Criterion, DICE, Motive, and Ripple Effect, is putting together a game. Created specifically to be a testing environment in regards to the Battlefield community. Now, from what can be inferred is that this game is meant to be more of the proving grounds for the Battlefield mechanics and game modes that are featured, plus, voiced by me specifically, being a staging ground for the feedback in regards to Battlefield. Which ultimately throws me off a bit. I mean, like, hasn't there been feedback in regards to, I don't know, Battlefield 2042? Has this kind of thing been applied not only to the main website of Battlefield, but also on Reddit? Did they even bother reading the feedback, or did they decide to throw it away like a piece of paper that was completely useless? What about Reddit? Have they read any of the feedback that was provided to them in their Reddit page? So far, the game had received 49 updates. 49! I counted them all inside of the main page. I'm not counting in the briefings nor the anti-cheat. Despite how useful anti-cheat is, it's highly detrimental to the core base of the whole entire game in general. The game started off as a flop because of its massive amount of bugs and glitches, which of course led us to these updates, but then again, it wouldn't really matter too much. As for most gamers within this world, first impressions of the game matters the most. And the first impression of Battlefield 2042 was a massive, buggy, glitchy mess of an FPS game, and cannot be taken seriously because it has that operator-based system just like Activision does with their Call of Duty games. And also, 49 updates to this game wouldn't be needed if EA allowed their fucking studios to work on the game a little bit longer. But no, they didn't. Instead, we got a buggy mess of a game that flopped so badly within the first few days. And the game right now is sitting at mixed reviews reviews within Steam, most likely veering to the negative side since its launch. And I'm pretty certain some of us already have noted this before, that this next game, which is Battlefield Labs, is just about to go through the same type of stereotypical EA bullshittery, where the devs will most likely mishandle the feedback that was provided to them, or implement some form of microtransaction system within their game, whether it be to buy a new battle pass for a few stuff, buy new items, or even in-game currency. Because that's typical EA bullshittery right there. Yeah, sure, you could go on me and say I don't play a Battlefield game, which is true. But I always look around to find out what could be possible and what couldn't be. For instance, Battlefront 2 introduced with these loot boxes, and also having to pay $80 to unlock Darth Vader. If EA can try to do this in Star Wars Battlefront 2 from 2017, I don't see how EA would not be able to try to do this kind of thing in some way inside of the Battlefield, let alone Battlefield Labs. And you know, the thing is, Battlefield is not the only big franchise made by EA that's going by these practices. I'm also pointing the finger out to Need for Speed as well, but that'll wait for later on throughout this video. Right now, I want to talk about the feedback part. Now really, the question is, will Battlefield Labs be a proper staging ground to the feedback that is given to this game, that is given to the developers, that is coming from the player base, whether it's from the community of Battlefield alone, or whether it's just a certain few individuals that just happen to buy the game? There's no definite answer of yes or no in regards to this, because the game isn't even out yet, so the best I could say is probably. But just to be safe, again, this is EA we're talking about, so most likely, no, it's not. Provided EA had Star Wars The Old Republic, or still has it to this day. The response in regards to the feedback for Star Wars The Old Republic from the creators and the publishers to the people who play this game is from minimum to none, pretty much. I started playing that game around the time when Showdown on Runnock was about to come up. So pretty much around the years of 2023 to 2022 at best. I only managed to beat the Sith Inquisitor class campaign, and then I pushed onwards to play the rest of the stories. So basically, played through 1 to 7 in one class. Of course, there are still some other character classes that I haven't completed that I wanted to complete, but at the very end of all this, whenever I return back to Sith Inquisitor anticipating a new story, it's like there's only a little bit that is being built onto this game, which is absurd because it hardly even keeps me playing into this game for a very long while, despite whether I'm playing the other classes or not. So if there was feedback in regards to the content of the game, which is to add in the narrative, where was that feedback? Oh yeah, it's in the fucking trash again. What about the feedback that was given to Dragon Age Veilguard at the very beginning of its release? In the trash. What about the feedback that was provided to them since FIFA and NFL 2025, and hell, maybe even the older titles as well? Guess what? In the trash. Again, there's one thing that we all should know about, is the fact that there's always going to be feedback on every single aspect of the game, regardless of how much you want to say that there isn't. Whether it be for the graphics, physics and mechanics, narration and the story of the game, and mostly the overall experience of said video game. Now, of course, we could talk about Need for Speed, for first things first. In regards to the feedback, let's talk about Need for Speed Unbound for a certain aspect. And I know some people are probably going to say, oh, but Ice, there's the thing about EA and feedback. They're actually listening to what the community is providing to them. And you know what? I'll admit, they're listening, as long as it has a price tag. But they're showing that they actually care now. No. Let's look at this real quickly underneath a fraction of a pizza. Within the 8 slices of a pizza, EA gives at least 1 out of the 8 an actual fuck about their consumers. Either that amount or 0.5. It has been like this since PS3 and Xbox 360, a console era that would introduce DLCs. Within the supercar era, EA didn't really bother to look into the feedback that often. And the whole entire reason as to, oh, they care now, is because Unbound, some people have been suggesting to EA to do some of the stuff they do for their other games and put them into this one. Most of which case were anti-consumer friendly practices. This is being said when you buy a battle pass inside the game after you bought it for full fucking price of $70. And in that battle pass you win basically from 1 to 2 new cars. That's each and every single time, of course. Honestly, most of the vehicles inside this game, inside of those battle passes, are not actually new. I say most of them because most of those vehicles are the exact same ones that are from the base game and from fucking Need for Speed Heat! What about those boss cars? The ones that we saw in Need for Speed Heat and were able to drive if we were able to beat the special campaigns and stuff like that. Well, guess what? They're in the game too. Underneath a $6 fucking price tag inside of the DLC section. So, no, you cannot tell me that EA actually gives a shit about their customers, their community, the whole entire player base of the game, if they're doing predatory stuff like this. Which is, from me, Need for Speed Unbound, by the looks of it, was basically nothing but false hopes. The devs didn't really even listen in to the constructive criticism that was given into this game. And if they did the bare minimum to make any good changes. Oh, but surely if we tell them that it has a good opportunity of making money, it'll get them to listen. And it'll get them to give a shit. Give me a fucking break. And honestly, Unbound is just basically another watered down and just long and boring Need for Speed Heat. And with a much more inferior story in comparison to that game. And you know what? I think it'll be the same thing for Need for Speed 2027. It'll be a lot more worse. Because I get the feeling not only that the physics and mechanics are going to be the same from that watered down Need for Speed 2015, but if EA was able to implement all of these predatory anti-consumer practices inside of Need for Speed Unbound, there's no denying that they're going to do the same thing for the next Need for Speed game. I just get the feeling. As for Battlefield, I can't really even say. Maybe it'll turn things up for the better, or it'll just be another shambling mess just like Battlefield 2042. And honestly, it just feels like that EA is basically down to its last legs, which is Need for Speed and Battlefield. This is most likely due to the failures of Dragon Age Veilguard. Not only because it's following in on woke DEI stuff, supposedly, but also at the same time, it was more colorful and cutesy. That is, unless you have done your research through YouTube, or you look through it on Steam or any other sources, or you played the game originally to know that the games were never meant to be cute or colorful in any means necessary. And yet the most brain-dead response as to how this game possibly failed, by EA's eyes, the lack of live service. Very unsurprising in every aspect. But honestly, that's not for me to talk about. What I'm talking about specifically is in regards to both Need for Speed and Battlefield. To conclude on this, I'd say that Battlefield might have a chance of becoming a good game at a certain degree. But then again, this is EA we're talking about. They don't even know how to say good game. As for Need for Speed 2027, I feel like it'll probably be a little bit more worse than Need for Speed Unbound in regards to the same watered down physics and mechanics, to the predatorious pricings on everything, whether that be for a battle pass or a new car or for some body kit. And maybe the progression will be a lot more worse and the story will become even more cringier in comparison. And probably even star in some people that nobody really cares, like that Jack Doherty kid. Either the game will be a little bit more worse, or we may not even get the game, since in general, Unbound wasn't really a good follow-up of Need for Speed Heat, despite how many people say that the game was actually successful. And really, I don't see how it is successful within this period of time. Maybe it's really successful at being a game that nobody would ever talk about in ever, as far as I know. Plus, a certain majority of people, including YouTubers, don't really talk about or play this game very much often. Because Well, there's not very much to say about the game, aside the fact that it's not really entertaining in some certain aspect. But as for very few, the iceberg is much more deeper than you anticipate once you get through and do the researching. Oh, and one more thing to add. The single player inside of Need for Speed Unbound is being shadowed over by the online multiplayer, which means you can't drive any of the cars that you earn inside of online through the battle pass in single player. Anyways, that's just enough coming from me as per se. Now, I'm just gonna go back to my little hole and just stay there for the very long while and just try to come up with some other content. But with that being said, I am Icecade and I am glad to have you here if you stopped by to watch this video. If you enjoy it, feel free to let me know. If you don't want to let me know, that's perfectly fine either way. And if you want, you could go ahead and consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. Feel free to share this video with a few of your friends and whatnot. So yeah, that's just pretty much about it. I am Icecade, and I shall see you on another piece of content.